And at number 10, Matthew Malloy. Charles Xavier once called Matthew Malloy the largest mutant power source Cerebro had ever registered. Malloy, who is from Earth 14923, can tap into extra-dimensional power sources that let him warp reality to his will. First appearing in Uncanny X-Men issue 23 and dying a handful of issues later in number 31, spoilers, Malloy has cosmic awareness, is capable of matter absorption, telekinesis, telepathy, can teleport, and can manipulate time. His mutant abilities manifested due to an emotional breaking point. Matthew had witnessed the death of his wife, who had been vaporized by a Skrull ship, while the two were in the middle of an argument. A year later, after his sister-in-law comforted him and told him she still saw him as her brother, he had an emotional breakthrough, which caused his powers to burst out of him. He lost control, which caused an eruption of energy and accidentally killed his sister-in-law. Awkward. S.H.I.E.L.D. would go on the hunt for him. He would kill Cyclops, Magic, and himself, then resurrect himself, visited the Jean Grey school, killed Emma Frost, and continued to accidentally wreak havoc. The Mutant Tempest would have to go back in time to prevent Matthew's parents from meeting, causing him to cease to exist. And at number 9, New Sun. Gambit on a regular basis is by no means an Omega level mutant, but on Earth 9921 there is a different version of Gambit called New Sun, a mutant who, as a child, was raised by a government project called Alpha 1 and was molded into a mutant with an expertise and total control of his powers, something that kind of backfired for the government since New Sun destroyed the Alpha 1 facility. He has total kinetic control. He's able of manipulating kinetic energy at a molecular level, turning objects' potential energy into kinetic energy, which would then make them explosive. He has no blocks or restraints preventing him from using his powers on living beings and does not need to make physical contact in order for them to work. In addition to that, he can cause other beings to not move, or cause them to be unable to stop if they are currently in motion. And he can simulate other versions of energy by manipulating the kinetic energy present by increasing molecular agitation. He can also transform himself into an energy wave that allows him to travel through space and into other dimensions in the multiverse. Oh, and he managed to kill his own reality's version of the Phoenix. Eventually he sought out Earth 616's Gambit and helped him escape Antarctica after he was abandoned there by the X-Men. And in return, 616 Gambit became a bit of an errand boy for this alternate Earth self of his. Moving on to number 8, Mad Jim Jaspers. Mad Jim Jaspers is an insane mutant who hails from Earth 238 and has nigh omnipotent reality warping abilities. Created by Alan Moore, David Thorpe, and Alan Davis, he first appeared in Marvel Superheroes issue 377 in 1981, and later popped into Earth 616 in Daredevil issue 7 from 1983. On Earth 238, he was a British politician who waged a war on mutants, having an anti-mutant and anti-superhero stance despite being a mutant himself. This was as a means for him to eliminate his fellow mutants in order to ensure his supremacy. Eventually he lost his sanity and created a cybernetic construct called the Fury, which could track, hunt, and eliminate mutants and superpowered individuals, a tool that turned out to be incredibly efficient in its successful extermination of those individuals, for the most part. His powers consist of dimensional manipulation, time manipulation, genetic manipulation, invulnerability, healing abilities, necromancy, levitation, animation, blast powers, divine powers, reality manipulation, shape-shifting, super strength, and teleportation. He can survive without a physical body, and his powers on 616 actually exceeded his limitations on Earth 238, the latter in which his abilities threatened to engulf the entire reality and spread to other realities, consuming them.
Number 7, Kid Omega. I mean, yeah, Omega is literally in his name, so we have to include Kid Omega. Meet Quintavious Quire. He made his first appearance in X-Men issue 134. He's been described as one of the most powerful telepaths next to Jean Grey, who may or may not be on this list later on, I'll never tell. But he was once a host of the Phoenix Force as well. He was one of Xavier's prized pupils until he put together the Omega Gang. He wasn't always a bad kid, it's just, you see what happened was on his birthday when he was still young, he received a call from his parents to say that, oh, you're adopted. Happy birthday. Awesome. And these kids are the hardest gang in town. They handle humans the way that they want, with violence, cool haircuts, and monologues, of course. Now he's been described as Omega level telepath and telekinetic and scion. Not bad for a kid. Number 6, Vulcan. He named himself after the Roman god of fire, so you already know that we're But Vulcan's real identity was that of Gabriel Summers. See, he was born after Cyclops and after Havoc. Well, not really born, he was surgically removed from his mother's body and then placed in an incubator accelerator, aged to be at his prime, and then sent to Earth to work for Devon Shikari, so a little bit different than the other guys. He escaped and was found by Moira McTaggart with no memories of who he is or where he came from, which is always good. But as a student, he was impressing Charles a lot, and all he wanted to do really was learn his abilities so he can help others. You can't beat that, come on, the guy, he's got a good heart. Sounds like the dream student. Now he can psionically manipulate energy however he wants. He can manipulate other mutant powers, and that's the scary part with Vulcan. He suppresses all of your superpowers. Emma Frost, Rachel Gray, and Xavier have all confirmed that after the events of M-Day, this alpha level mutant absorbed energies from the depowered mutants and then became an omega level one himself. Number 5. Storm. Aurora Monroe made her debut in Giant-Sized X-Men issue 1. She was recruited by Charles and joined the team to save other original students from Krakoa. Now, she was appointed leader after several years of hard work, and Storm has been referred to as a witch before because her powers to control the air and the elements, all that jazz. I mean, fair, she's kind of witch-like. Now, things go up a notch in X-Men issue 135 during the Dark Phoenix saga. Sebastian Shaw calls her a weather witch. Adds the word weather before, okay, it's a bit specific. See, it's not just storms in Earth that Aurora can control, even in space she can summon natural energy. Doesn't matter where you are, she'll find you. Number 4, Mr. M. Mr. M first appeared in District X issue 2. His powers came to be after an accident, like most of them. See, he accidentally turned a boy bullying his cousin inside out, and then he was stuck like that for 3 hours. That's the worst thing I can think of, I think. He didn't have lots of friends, I mean, obviously. The only ones close to him was Hannah Levy, who was not an Omega level mutant per se, but she did eat bugs. After M-Day, Mr. M himself was one of the few who kept his powers. Now those Omega level powers being, well, I mean, this guy can literally do it all. He can control machines, resurrect the dead, phase through objects, manipulate matter, telekinesis, telepathy, and much, much more. Number 3, Proteus. Kevin McTaggart is of course related to Moira McTaggart, as you could have guessed right then. Now he's the son of her and her husband Joseph. Now their marriage was awful. Joseph was a total piece of shit. He was abusive physically and mentally, so Moira got out of there. She didn't even tell Joseph that she was pregnant, and to be honest, that's probably for the best. Guy's the worst. So young Kevin and Moira lived together at her mutant research center off the coast of Scotland. Now Kevin, as he got older, manifested abilities, which basically was this uncontrollable need for power. See, he craved it, his body needed it, so Moira had to hide him. She kept him locked in a cell for years, only referred to as Mutant X, because she wanted to keep him safe, and also others, you know? So one day while Magneto was fighting the X-Men, his cell was damaged and he got out. Now since the isosteric energy in his cell was no longer holding him back, Kevin defeated Polaris, he defeated Multiple Man, and even escaped the Phoenix. He survived the Phoenix, that's crazy. Now his body was starting to burn out like Moira tried to prevent all this time. So the only solution here was that he had to possess another human host, and then another one after that, and so on and dan forth. Now he renames himself Proteus, with his imagination being the only thing that limits his powers. He's made of psionic energy, and he too can warp reality. Every time he possesses a new host, he gets stronger and stronger until eventually the host burns out and then he has to possess another poor soul. What a horrible, vicious cycle. Number 2, Franklin Richards. I was the impossible boy who could dream the future. I was a god, born to be with the mutants, but also born into the Fantastic Four, which means I have twice as many enemies. Damn, you could say that again, Franklin. He was born in New York City. Franklin Richards is the son, of course, of Reed Richards and Sue Storm, and he is quoted from Galactus himself as the most powerful mutant ever. That is quite, put that on a resume, that sounds great. He's a mutant beyond Omega power, in fact. See, Franklin was a member of Gen X, and he's also a future X-Men member in the Ultimate X-Men comics. Now, some of his powers include vast reality warping, psionic powers, he has control over the universe, so that's cool, must be nice. Precognitive powers are also helpful even when he's dreaming. His dreams will tip him off on the future and what's going to happen in them. Now, the only dreams I have are the ones where my teeth are falling out, or I can't run and my legs are made of rubber or something like that, you know? It's not as fun. He can resurrect the dead, he can time travel, he can teleport, astral project, and he can duplicate planets and or people. So if your eyebrows aren't raised yet, that's fine, I can continue. At a young age, he was able to create a pocket universe. And in Fantastic Four issue number 604, this kid took not only 1, but 3 Celestials. One of them, he laid them out with just 1 punch. So impressive. And finally, number 1, Jean Grey. Of course, we have to end on Jean Grey. She is an Omega level mutant born with telekinetic and telepathic powers. She was one of the OG members of the X-Men. Now, seeing the potential in Jean's strength, the Phoenix Force attached itself to her while she was in space with the Fantastic Four. It was drawn to her natural power. See, Xavier himself felt like he had to hide her true powers from her when she was just a child. He locked some of her abilities away in her mind. So the Phoenix Force was like, I smell something, what is that? What's hiding somewhere? So this dark cosmic force started to change her, and she didn't just get more powerful, she ended up becoming well, low-key, she kind of became a villain. She ended up destroying an entire solar system that killed like, I don't know, billions of people, and then she took her own life in order to keep the universe safe. Now, a few years later, it was actually revealed that it wasn't the Jean Grey that had died, just the Phoenix as a separate entity, which is that's better. That's definitely better.
Starting us off in at number 10, Monarch. Monarch, aka Jamie Braddock, has quantum reality manipulation abilities. He's the elder sibling of Betsy Braddock, aka Psylocke, and Brian Braddock, aka Captain Britain, and he is also schizophrenic. That, unfortunately, is the reason why he ends up on our list, because he believes the reality he is living within is a dream of his own making. And because of that, he may be easily susceptible to manipulation and taken advantage of. Which, like, also not cool, guys. That's a scary thought when it comes to an Omega level mutant who possesses terrifying power. I mean, he is capable of resurrecting the dead and transforming living beings into completely different forms. Of his abilities, his sister Psylocke once said, I quote, "Power runs deep in our family. He got the full measure, the ability to pull the quantum strings that define casualty. He got himself so tangled he'll never twist free." Yikes. Moving on to number 9, we have Storm. Storm is by no means an evil mutant. She is a tried and tested member of the X-Men and has always fought for the greater good, whether that was protecting innocent mutants or human lives. But now that the X-Men have become more extreme in their methods and have developed a specific society with specific rules on Krakoa, it wouldn't be surprising to see Storm turn into a militant enforcer of Charles Xavier's. And in the past, primarily in alternate universes, Storm has turned evil. She once killed Black Panther and his entire family and took over Wakanda for herself. That being said, she does seem to be one of the X-Men members who are more so pragmatic and wise, and we believe there would be a minimal chance of the weather manipulator turning a nefarious cheek. Moving on to number 8, Franklin Richards. Okay, so it seems pretty unrealistic that Franklin Richards would turn evil, but in the eyes of the X-Men and those with allegiance to Krakoa, he could very well be perceived as an antagonistic force thanks to his allegiance with the human race. He's currently sticking with his fam at the Fantastic Four, and considering he's so young, there's still a lot of time for him to develop his own opinions. So many see Franklin as a bit of a wild card in terms of the upcoming mutant stories. Cyclops was even trying to sway him, or rather sway his family, into having him join on Krakoa. Now that in itself is a bit of a threat. Franklin has always proven to be one of the strongest characters in the Marvel Universe, capable of warping reality on a massive scale. He once even created a pocket universe that was an exact replica of the 616. And he did that subconsciously. In other words, he is a wickedly powerful kid. And at number 7, the Marquis of Death. The Marquis of Death was considered to be a mutant beyond Omega level, and technically on his alternate Earth he was the most powerful mutant since he was the only mutant to have existed in that reality. He would teach Dr. Doom everything he knew, with Doom as his apprentice, and Doom would be responsible for killing him too. The Marquis, whose real name is Clyde Winsham Jr., hails from Earth 807128, and first appeared in Fantastic Four issue 562 in 2009, and died a handful of issues later. Capable of warping reality on a multiversal scale, he can travel between parallel universes, effortlessly obliterate pretty much anything, which also includes entire realities, and can create abstract entities who overpower the likes of Galactus. He could even control eternity, having the entity battle on his behalf. And that's a scary thought. Clyde essentially made himself the master of time and space. Thank God for Dr. Doom. And at 6, Proteus. Proteus is the son of Moira McTaggart, a mutant by the name of Kevin McTaggart, who can psionically manipulate reality. He can manipulate the energy around him at will, with his only limit being his own imagination. Having to live most of his life in forced seclusion, his powers are not to be taken lightly. He exists in a state of pure psionic energy, and has shown he is capable of possessing human bodies, although that usually ends poorly with the bodies of most beings he's possessed burning out within a few days, even a few hours. None of the individuals he's possessed in the past have shown capable of breaking free of his domination. When possessing, Proteus can access all of their memories and retains them even after he's left their body. There is one restraint though: those with metal in their bodies appear to be immune to his possession, like Wolverine, with metal being his only weakness as it disrupts his energy and can disperse his consciousness. He can manipulate reality by transmuting matter, and he bends the laws of physics. He can turn buildings into liquid, a vehicle into bees, which he then commands. He can strip a person of their mutant powers, reverse local gravity, open fissures in the earth, and painfully stretch individuals into liquid shapes. His abilities are contingent on his line of sight. If he shifts to a different thing to manipulate, his previous manipulation will typically warp back and return to normal. And at number 5, Monarch. Monarch, aka Jamie Braddock Jr., first appeared in Marvel's panels in Captain Britain issue 9 in 1976. He is the brother of Captain Britain, Brian Braddock, and Psylocke, Elizabeth Braddock. Jamie is capable of quantum reality manipulation, which allows Jamie to see the world as invisible string constructs. He can pull these to transform reality. Now he can only manipulate dense forms, with phased beings showing some level of resistance to him. And formerly he needed to be close enough to a target to touch the cosmic filaments it or they were composed of, but his range may now have grown. Now in addition to this, he has also demonstrated sorcery abilities, summoning extra-dimensional creatures and depicting mind control over others. He's proven capable of teleporting and, most horrifically, warping bodies into terrifying shapes. Yeah, no bueno. Moving on to number 4, Iceman. Now a lot of you guys mentioned Iceman and a few of our upcoming numbers in the comments below, so save them for last. Bobby Drake's abilities have really grown in power since he first appeared as one of the initial X-Men members in the X-Men issue 1 back in 1963. Iceman's Omega power is temperature manipulation, and while it's been stated that he's yet to tap into his full potential, the character's powers can potentially influence the ecosystem of the entire world. He can instantly decrease the temperature of ambient water vapor in his immediate environment, dropping it to below 0 degrees Celsius, which freezes it into ice. Now the ice doesn't break unless Bobby wills it to, and he can create an array of ice structures which include projectiles, shields, slides, and he has even crafted miniature cities before. He does not emanate cold, instead he decreases thermal energy, which he can also perceive in objects around him. And when Emma Frost possessed his body, we learned that he can do even more, like control all forms of moisture, freeze the fluids within people's bodies, and travel as liquid, solid, or gas. Up next, number 3, Hope Summers. Hope Summers first appeared in X-Men issue 205 back in 2007, and was the first mutant born after the events of House of M. Hope's ability is power manipulation. She can psychically manipulate and mimic the powers of other mutants, which is an ability that has unspecified limits currently, but mimics her victims' powers at their utmost capacity, which is pretty darn impressive. Her restriction of course depends on how close she is to the mutants that she's mimicking. And it's not only mimicry that she can do. She has proven immune to Rogue's lethal absorption powers, with her touch erasing all of the memories and powers that Rogue had previously absorbed. But she also cured her of the Strain 88 virus, so hey, not too shabby. Hope has also proven to jumpstart a newly emerging mutant power to an undefined extent, and she can redirect the force of magnetic fields into negative matter. Up next, number 2, Magneto. It should be no surprise that Magneto finds himself on this list. He was actually who Xavier, in his files in House of X1, used as an example when defining an Omega level mutant versus a mutant with an Omega level ability. I quote, "Both Magneto and Forge are the most powerful mutants of their power types on the planet, magnetism and technopathy, respectively. But what makes Magneto, and not Forge, an Omega level mutant is that the upper limit of Forge's measurable powers could hypothetically be surpassed, and in fact has by multiple humans on the planet, while the upper limit of Magneto's power cannot be surpassed by any measurable fashion." End quote. So, what do those powers entail? Well, he can manipulate magnetic fields to achieve a wide variation of effects. The maximum amount that he can manipulate at one time is still unknown, although he's proven such feats as moving asteroids and levitating objects like a 30,000-ton nuclear submarine. His abilities extend to an atomic level, specifically the electromagnetic force responsible for chemical bonding, which has given him the power to manipulate chemical structures and rearrange matter. He can generate electromagnetic pulses and manipulate electromagnetic energy right down to the photons. He can turn invisible by warping light and can resist strong telepathic powers, which has often been explained thanks to his helmet, or because of his electromagnetic powers interfering with the attack, or just from his own willpower. Plus, he's a genius, with experience in fields that include genetic manipulation, particle physics, and engineering. He also once had the power of a magnetic personality. But as you can imagine, that kind of fell into obscurity compared to pretty much everything else we just mentioned. He was a charmer. I guess he still is. And last but not least, in at number 1, Storm. Storm's status as an Omega level mutant is more of a recent revelation than some of the others on our list. Storm has the ability to manipulate weather, a psionic power that lets her control all forms of weather over vast territories, both on Earth and in extraterrestrial ecosystems. This entails modifying temperature, controlling all forms of precipitation, humidity, and moisture at a molecular level. She can generate lightning and other electromagnetic atmospheric phenomena, and can control atmospheric pressure. She can create tornadoes, thunderstorms, blizzards, and even hurricanes, and then dissipate that weather entirely to form clear skies. She can channel ambient electromagnetism through her body in order to create electric blasts. She can flash freeze objects or people, change atmospheric pollutants into acid rain or toxic fog, fly, of course, and even manipulate the air inside of a person's lungs. She can control natural forces the likes of cosmic storms, ocean currents, solar wind, and the electromagnetic field, along with the ability to separate water molecules into oxygen and hydrogen via electrolysis, which gives her the ability to breathe underwater. All in all, she is one of the most powerful mutants on Earth.
Number 10. Storm. In Uncanny X-Men Volume 1, Issue 147, Storm finds herself turned into a living chrome statue by Dr. Doom. When her fellow X-Men arrive to release her, she is enraged from being trapped as a statue. Her fear of claustrophobia allows her to connect with her powers in a way she never has before. She rages and unleashes a storm that encapsulates the entire world as she becomes one with the planet and its elements. Fortunately, her fellow X-Men are able to talk her down, likening her to the Phoenix and reminding Storm of Jean's fate when she too was corrupted by power and turned to the dark side. That allows her to let go of all that rage and all that intense power that she is feeling and make her no longer a threat to the entirety of the Earth. This allows us to see from an early stage just how awesome Storm's powers were. Needless to say, when she was confirmed as Omega, those of us that had been with the X-Men since Volume 1, I'm sure, were gleeful at the news and unsurprised. Of course, Storm is Omega. She's on goddess levels. Number 9. Vulcan. Vulcan is the other Summers brother. There's Cyclops, Havoc, and Vulcan. Gabriel Summers, however, is maybe the worst of the three, although both Alex and Scott have had their moments. Vulcan toiled to seize the Shi'ar Empire for himself after marrying Deathbird. When his father Corsair demanded that Vulcan stop his ruthless pursuit of power, Vulcan killed him, declaring himself emperor, and caused a great rift in the Shi'ar Empire, plunging it into a civil war. He was also just a generally awful brother to Havoc. Not cool. Number 8. Jamie Braddock. Jamie Braddock, also known as Monarch, was originally the cool non-powered older brother to Betsy and Brian Braddock. He was in charge of running the family business, Braddock Industries, and was really good at it. Unfortunately, that didn't last. His family was targeted by a villain, and afterwards Jamie began to get involved in gambling and criminal activity. As a result, he ended up being kidnapped by Dr. Crocodile, who sought to punish him for his wicked deeds. Jamie was driven insane, but this also caused his reality-altering powers to be triggered, leaving him crazy but quite powerful, and for a time obsessed with wearing Speedos. What is up with that? Is that what happens when you have your your reality altering powers activated? My reality altering powers are activated. I must wear a Speedo. He went on to attack the British superhero team Excalibur, brainwash children, and poison Black Widow, and always ends up being a problem brother who, when you think you can trust him, you actually can't, and who, when you think he's dead, he probably isn't.
Moving on to number 7, Elixir. Elixir, aka Josh Foley, is an Omega level mutant capable of biological manipulation. Prior to Josh's powers manifesting, he was a member of the anti-mutant group, the Reavers. Whether or not you read that as he might have some internalized mutant phobia issues, he's often found other reasons to be an outsider in the mutant community. As a side effect of having to be electrically shocked awake in order to heal himself, all of his skin and hair transformed into a reflective gold color. He dated a teacher at the Xavier Institute for Higher Learning that briefly ostracized him, and he's been through a handful of traumatic experiences since joining up with the mutant team. Aside from his capability to heal others, he can also pull off the reverse of that. He can manipulate life forces, cause boils and welts to appear, create tumors, and even cause death. Here's hoping that he stays as a good intended mutant. Moving on to number 6, we have Kid Omega. Kid Omega doesn't have the most squeaky clean reputation. He had quite the rebellious streak back in the day when he first joined up with the Xavier Institute and started up his own gang called the Omega Gang. An incredibly powerful telepath, he is a troublemaker and a little bit of a bully at first, but then it evolves into him forcing his gang to take the mutant drug kick, resulting in them accosting a gang of humans, maiming some and killing others. He also rallies up other students in a riot with him over Xavier's policies at the school. At one point, when he was fed up with people, he decided to exile himself on Krakoa altogether, where he would encounter the Phoenix Force. Now these days, he is loyal to Krakoa now that it is a sovereign nation. But hey, if his past is a sign of anything, we might have something to worry about in the future. And at number 5, Legion. Legion, aka David Haller, is the son of Charles Xavier and Gabrielle Haller. He suffers from dissociative identity disorder, and his mutation is best described as power manifestation. Capable of altering reality and time on a cosmic scale, he is held back due to his multiple personalities. Now each personality manifests a different power, and there are a lot of personalities that he's exhibited over the years. He's got over 1,000 of them and counting. David's allegiance according to House of X issue 1 is unknown. Last time we saw Legion, things weren't looking too hot for him. He had been transported to a different reality created by X-Man, placed in the Danger Room prison complex in solitary confinement, although he managed to control and alter other prisoners' memories. He was eventually returned to the real world in Age of X-Man Omega Issue 1. Needless to say, his stance on the current state of mutant-human relations is ambiguous at best. Up next, number 4, Jean Grey. Remember the Phoenix Saga? Yeah, we do too. While Jean Grey is inherently good, we've seen how absolutely destructive her powers can be when merged with the Phoenix Force. And it's worth mentioning that Jean is the only character to ever force the Phoenix Force against its own cosmic will to do her bidding without her even being its host at the time. Now, her control over the Phoenix Force when bonded has varied over the years. Regardless, those facts are all pretty scary if one were to suggest that Jean's capacity for acting in more nefarious fashion was realized, especially if it is under the orders or manipulation of Charles Xavier, since realistically, we've already seen him turn to a bit of a darker side. Yeah. Moving on to number 3, Vulcan. Vulcan is a mutant who can manipulate energy on a grand scale. He's also the younger brother of Cyclops and Havoc, although he had a much different upbringing than his brothers. Before he was born, his mother, Catherine Summers, was abducted by the maestro of the Shi'ar Imperium and killed, and Vulcan, aka Gabriel Summers, was removed from her body and put into an incubator accelerator. Sent to Earth to be a slave, he would eventually escape. Now, in the years that followed, he played both the role of friend and foe to the X-Men. Even before the Dawn of X reboot, Cyclops still believed that Vulcan was a threat. Yet after Krakoa became a sovereign nation, he was confirmed to be back on Earth and loyal to Krakoa. Moving on to number 2, Exodus. Exodus is a mutant who was born in 12th century France, first appearing in Marvel's panels in X-Factor issue 92 in 1993. He possesses a variety of powers, with his most prominent being telekinesis. In addition to that, he is telepathic, immortal, can teleport, has regenerative healing factor, and superhuman physical attributes. He's also traditionally a supervillain, whose high power levels are likely due to tampering from Apocalypse. In the 20th century, Exodus was freed from a crypt Apocalypse had trapped him within for centuries. He was freed by Magneto, who then took him over to the Acolytes. He actually ended up succeeding Magneto as the leader of the Acolytes when Magneto was incapacitated. Now, despite his villainous past, Exodus, along with several other villainous mutants, came to Krakoa, the now independent state of mutants, and was allowed to stay there as long as he adhered to the laws of Krakoa. He is actually a part of the Quiet Council who oversees the mutant nation, alongside Mystique and Mr. Sinister in the winter chapter of the Council. And finally, in at number 1, Magneto. Magneto is the most obvious answer for the number 1 spot on our list. Why? Well, because for years he was the penultimate X-Men villain. Although, to call him evil is a little questionable. He's always been a villain with a point, with his main goal being to protect the mutant race. Although he kinda does it in a pretty bad way. This is where it gets a little morally gray. Magneto regards mutants as the evolutionary superior to human beings. He does not believe that a peaceful mutant-human coexistence is possible. Initially, he wanted to conquer the world to allow mutants to replace humans as the dominant species. So you can see why he bumped ideologies with Charles Xavier in the past. But now that the two have teamed up and are presiding over Krakoa as part of the Quiet Council, Magneto's influence over Xavier's recent revelation that he and the X-Men have exhausted all other options in seeking equality for mutants could lead to catastrophic consequences, not just for mutant kind but for the rest of the Marvel universe. We've already seen some tension grow. And case in point, when Magneto, acting as the Krakoan ambassador, spoke with other ambassadors from across the globe, made the point of stating that, while he was not threatening them in any way, they needed to acknowledge that they, I quote, have new gods now. Yeah, talk about foreshadowing. Starting us off in at number 10, Vulcan. Vulcan, who was first introduced in X-Men Deadly Genesis issue 1 in 2006, is the younger brother of Cyclops and Havoc, and compared to his siblings, he is a baddie. Vulcan, aka Gabriel Summers, had a much more tragic origin story than his brothers. After his mother Catherine Summers was abducted by the Magister of the Shi'ar Empire and was killed by him, the unborn child inside of her was removed, that's Vulcan, and then placed in an incubation accelerator, which is normally used to breed slaves. Later, Vulcan would escape after being aged to an adolescent, and was found by Moira McTaggart with little to no memories of his past. Vulcan is capable of a whole lot. His powers include vast energy absorption, manipulation, transformation, and projection, all of which he does psionically. He can also control exotic energies like Cyclops' optic blast and magical energy. He has limited superpower replication and repression, force field projection and manipulation, psionic resistance, and life support and limited regeneration. Fun fact, Vulcan became an Omega level mutant when he absorbed a massive amount of mutant energies from M-Day. Moving on to our next number, in at 9, Elixir. Elixir is a character who first appeared on Marvel's panels in 2003 in New Mutants Volume 2, Issue 5. He is capable of controlling the biological structure of any organic matter, which also includes his own body, an ability that is dependent on his proximity to said matter. Naturally, this allows him to have great healing abilities, but he can do much more than that. Elixir can boost and restore mutant abilities, he can cause welts and boils to appear on an individual, he can manipulate the life forces of others, create tumors, cure the legacy virus, cleanse the body of toxins like drugs, and even cause death. He's also practically immortal, with his abilities allowing him to resurrect himself, be reborn into a new body, or just regenerate on a cellular level. Must be nice. And it's not just himself that he can resurrect. He was able to affect the 16 million deceased mutants on Genosha, all at once, and was capable of resurrecting them according to Magneto's speculation. The Stepford Cuckoos also transferred Beast's knowledge of anatomy, biology, and genetics into his mind, furthering his capabilities. The one downside though is that Elixir can pass out after pushing his powers too far. Moving on to number 8, Legion. Legion, aka David Charles Haller, is the son of Professor Xavier, who is known for his severe mental illness, specifically his dissociative identity disorder, in which each of his alternate personas controls one of his superpowers. Legion first appeared in New Mutants issue 25 in 1985, and his powers include reality warping, shape-shifting, matter manipulation and transmutation, energy manipulation, telepathy, telekinesis, teleportation, and time travel. But here is where things get interesting. His multiple personality disorder is rooted in his telepathy. Because of this, he can absorb other people into his mind if he is right next to them when they die. The manifestation of his individual powers are associated with a different alter ego, each which controls a different power. The culmination of all his personalities and their powers makes him one of the strongest mutants in existence. After the Age of X, Legion was given a neural switchboard wristband, which allowed him to key in a number which stimulates cells in his thalamus and neocortex, creating a one-way link between his mind and one of his sub-selves. This lets him utilize his power sets without being overwhelmed by his other personalities.
Number 7, Magneto. While Magneto may do what he does for what he believes is a just cause, there are still times when even he himself seems to be crossing his own lines. While Professor Xavier has often been an advocate for achieving peace and coexistence between mutants and humans, Magneto has seen the challenges between the two groups to mean that coexistence is really not possible. The way he sees things, it's mutants versus humankind. But even he took things too far when an Uncanny X-Men Volume 1 issue 500, after he had regained his powers, he used them to make Sentinels attack the X-Men. Sentinels! The very things that threaten the existence of all mutants. The nerve. Number 6, Jean Grey. Where to begin with Jean Grey? Being as powerful as she is opens up Jean to a lot of darkness, and when she ends up merging with the Phoenix Force, she ends up becoming corrupted by the power she manages to tap into, becoming, well, Dark Phoenix. As Dark Phoenix, she committed genocide, destroying the entirety of the Dabari race when she absorbed the power of their sun, causing it to supernova and destroying their planet and everyone on it. Beyond that, she also antagonized Emma Frost, telepathically torturing her. Sure, Emma Frost stole Scott Summers away, but I really don't think she deserved to be tortured for it. Besides, if there is anyone to blame in that scenario, it really should be Scott himself. You two ladies, just calm down. Number 5, Stryfe. Stryfe is a clone of Cable who was created in case Cable did not survive his technovirus illness. Stryfe himself has no such technovirus as a result, but ended up being kidnapped and raised by Apocalypse, causing him to become pretty villainous, which I guess is kind of like a virus in a sense. It's like a moral virus. He was the one responsible for unleashing the legacy virus on the world when he sent the canister it was contained in to Mr. Sinister, telling him that it contained important genetic materials belonging to the Summers line, and causing Mr. Sinister to open it, unleashing the legacy virus. While the legacy virus was stopped, it was considered one of the greatest threats to mutant kind. Beyond that, Stryfe also looks super cool. Too cool in my opinion for a villain, as it makes me want to be on his side of things. Stop seducing me to join the dark side with your stylish suit of armor, Stryfe. Number 4, Legion. David Haller is the son of Charles Xavier and Gabriel Haller. As a child, he was scarred from witnessing a terrorist attack while in Beirut, and this caused him to develop a split personality disorder. Each personality that lives within him, and sometimes even without him, is fully independent and exhibits its own mutant ability, meaning that the access that Legion has appears to be almost limitless when it comes to all the different powers he can at times possess. It's not really his fault that he has a tendency to take things too far, as the damage he does is often caused by his mental disorder. When he is able to demonstrate control control over his powers, he can actually be quite helpful, even fighting alongside the X-Men and his father Professor X. That is, when he's not being, well, kind of evil. But when he loses control, his abilities tend to manifest in unpredictable ways. He once blew up an entire facility after losing control of his powers. Number 3. Nate Gray. Nate Gray is the son of Jean Grey and Scott Summers from the alternate Earth 295. He does not need a body to exist and has reformed himself from energy after his apparent death. Ergo, he doesn't need to eat, breathe, drink, or sleep either. He can also exist outside of all realities as well. He is known for being one of, if not the, most powerful psionists in the Marvel Universe. While he may not be as strong as he once was, you know, before he became a shaman and gained a better sense of discipline and control, he was drastically wild and overpowered. He had very little control over the insane level of telekinetic, telepathic, and matter manipulation powers that he possessed. He could cloak himself and others, making himself appear invisible. He once destroyed an entire moon with his telekinesis, and he has stated before that he was created to destroy worlds. That's just how dangerous and powerful Nate Gray can be. Number 2. Franklin Richards. Franklin Richards has created more than one universe, including a pocket universe that he used to save a bunch of heroes, including his parents, from villain Onslaught. By the way, it was in a little rubber ball. It's pretty cute. He has also resurrected Galactus, granted after discovering that the universe couldn't really continue to exist without that cosmic being, and he is powerful enough to kill Celestials. But despite all this power, Franklin has often been shown as using his power for good, not for bad. Still, the amount of power he has seems so ludicrous that I would argue he still needs to be stopped simply for this reason. Sure, we can trust him right now, but if someone could manipulate this currently young mutant, it could result in complete chaos and disaster. Let's not forget that this is a child who had to have his mind shut down by his father, Mr. Fantastic, at one point because it was just so dangerous. He got a dangerous mind, he's too powerful. As Galactus stated at the end of History of the Marvel Universe, Franklin Richards is the most powerful mutant ever born, which also makes him one of the most unstoppable and most dangerous. Number 1. Matthew Malloy. Who could possibly be more Omega and more potentially dangerous than Franklin Richards himself, who can manipulate reality? Well, another mutant who also has the ability to manipulate matter. Matthew Malloy. He accidentally killed Emma Frost using his abilities after she hit him and he just shouted "stop it," deleting her from existence. Malloy himself was kind of written out of existence, but before that he was known for creating the largest power signature on Cerebro ever. In fact, Professor Xavier was forced to put mental blocks on him just to stop him from accidentally wreaking havoc on the world with his limitless power. Matthew's power actually comes from another dimension, like Cyclops, which is why it also appears to be the inexhaustible kind. However, after Xavier's death, his power's mental barriers started to deteriorate, causing him to become very, very dangerous. Any surge of emotion can trigger his abilities. He once threatened to destroy the entire state of South Carolina with a potential energy blast, and his telepathic and telekinetic abilities are off the charts. So he would be one of those ones that went too far if he still existed. He gone now.
Number 10. Stryfe. So this is old, things have changed, but he was Omega once, so yeah, here he is. Say hello to Cable's clone. He first debuted in the New Mutants number 86 back in 1990, and more than his powers, what made him so dangerous was the Legacy virus. He was the originator of that. People can find ways to be a menace outside of their power sets. This virus at first was Legacy 1 and then 2, but eventually mutated into Legacy 3. Version 1 was like a cancer, while version 2 targeted the X gene and would eventually lead to one's powers going haywire before you burnt out completely. This was to try and ignite a war between humans and mutants. Eventually the virus became Legacy 3, which could infect anyone. See, with Omegas you have to worry about so much more, especially if they're villains. Just regular dastardly do, plus what their powers can do when you try and stop them. Stryfe was stopped, so it's fine for now. That's why he's so low on this list.
In at number 9, Matthew Malloy. Matthew Malloy is a pretty tragic case. He finds himself landing in one of our higher numbers on our list thanks to the fact that he was, in fact, stopped by some pretty drastic measures. But let's jump back for a second and discuss this fellow. Hailing from Earth 12923, Matthew Malloy had latent mutant abilities that surfaced at one of the worst times ever. His story begins with him and his wife Jules engaging in an argument that is rudely interrupted by the Skrull invasion, and a Skrull ship that then lets out an energy blast that vaporizes Jules. His death is then prevented by a shield helicarrier. A year later, Matthew runs into his sister-in-law, Alana, who tries to reassure Matthew, who is in the midst of struggling with some serious trauma, telling him that she still considers him to be her brother. This sweet sentiment causes Matthew to have an emotional breakthrough, which causes his powers to manifest, releasing a massive eruption of energy that then kills Alana. Awkward. He then proceeds to go around accidentally causing mass destruction and is approached by S.H.I.E.L.D. director Maria Hill, who does not handle the situation in the best light, further triggering Matthew, who ends up killing Cyclops, Magic, and Emma Frost. Tempest then goes back in time with the help of Professor X to ensure that Matthew's parents never meet, causing him to cease to exist. Malloy's abilities, for the record, consisted of reality warping, energy generation, space-time manipulation, teleportation, resurrection, matter manipulation, did I already say that? Telepathy, and telekinesis. But he's dead now, so I guess he doesn't need to be stopped.
Number 8. Legion. So Legion is Professor Xavier's son and also has an excellent effects series in its final season at the time of this recording. David Haller first debuted in New Mutants number 25 back in 1985 and is a mutant of incredible ability with a myriad of powers. Unfortunately, his telepathy led to severe mental illness from an early age, when he absorbed his first mind, that of a terrorist leader who had instigated an attack of which David had been the only survivor. His powers manifested, and so did the beginning of his multiple personalities. Initially, Legion only had a few core personalities, who were the gateway to his abilities, but over time that came to be hundreds. Sometimes they would overtake his body and just do whatever they wanted. However, over time, Legion has come to be able to control his abilities, sort of, partially through increased mental control, but also through tech. The thing is, comics have this little problem about progress. Resets, retcons, etc. It's why several people can have different information about a character and all be right depending upon what time period they're talking about. So Legion relapses, it's a thing. So yeah, he needs to be stopped, but with love and support.
Moving on to number 7, Psylocke. Psylocke is a mutant who has the ability to construct weapons made of psychic energy, typically in the form of a blade. But that is not all. She has precognitive powers and is capable of telepathy and telekinesis. But let us backtrack for a sec. In her earlier appearances in Uncanny X-Men, she was capable of telepathy, reading, and projecting thoughts over long distances, and capable of manipulating people's minds even to the point of possessing them. She could also affect people's memories, project mental illusions, subdue, and tap into others' powers. Now flash forward to her physical transformation into a Japanese ninja assassin. Yes, that is a whole other story. She gained highly developed fighting skills, and later in the Dark Angel saga, her full psionic potential was unlocked by Jean Grey, but the Jean Grey who originated from the Age of Apocalypse timeline, with it being noted that Psylocke is now a telepath on par with both Jean Grey and Charles Xavier. In at number 6, Mr. M. Mr. M is a character who first appeared in 2004 in District X issue 2, and is an Omega level mutant who is capable of telekinesis, telepathy, energy projection, and the psionic manipulation of energy and matter on a subatomic level. He has complete control over the atomic and subatomic structure of matter and energy. M has manipulated and generated lightning, fire, and explosions. He's become intangible, has repaired machinery, created force fields, removed and augmented mutant abilities, has created and evolved lesser life forms, and even has displayed mind control. All in all, dude is pretty impressive. Up next at 5, Exodus. Exodus is a supervillain who first appeared in X-Factor issue 92 back in 1993, and was born in the 12th century in France. He would become Magneto's right-hand man after the iconic villain freed him from the crypt that he was locked within by Apocalypse. A previous member of the Brotherhood of Mutants, his abilities include telepathy, telekinesis, teleportation, an accelerated and regenerative healing factor, superhuman physical attributes, and of course he is immortal. It's speculated that his high power levels may have been a side effect of tampering done by Apocalypse. Exodus once used his mind control powers to command a dozen X-Men to instantaneously fall asleep. He is proven capable of countering reality manipulation, and his powers are too strong to be absorbed by Rogue in their entirety. In addition to that, in the presence of Magneto's acolytes, his powers have proven to excel further. During Avengers issue 369, he simultaneously crushed Genosha via a massive force field, immobilized Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, Crystal, and Jean Grey in a different force field, resisted Professor X's telepathic control, protected himself from physical attacks, and dished out psionic damage to members of both the X-Men and Avengers team. That's all at once. Not too shabby, huh? Up next at 4, Quentin Quire. Quentin Quire, aka Kid Omega, made his debut in New X-Men issue 134 back in 2003. Initially, he was a bit of a bad egg during his time at the Xavier School, starting up his own gang known aptly as the Omega Gang. But more recently, he was a member of the Fresh Start iteration of the West Coast Avengers, putting his psionic powers to good use. So what exactly do his skills entail of? Well, he has advanced cognitive and telepathic abilities that allow him to construct and organize his thoughts at an incredibly fast rate. He can manipulate the minds of others, both overtly and covertly, resist mind probes, and disable other forms of psychic manipulation. Now, according to Charles Xavier, his powers are deep and subtle. and he's able to influence the minds of those around him. Similar to Psylocke, he can manifest his abilities to create weapons like a psychic shotgun or explosives. And at 3, Nate Gray. Nate Gray came to be during the Age of Apocalypse story event. He's an alternate version of Cable who hails from Earth 295, the world in which that event occurs. He is the biological son of Scott Summers and Jean Grey, born from genetic tampering by Mr. Sinister. And unlike Cable, thanks to not being infected by a techno-organic virus, he was able to achieve his potential with his telepathic and telekinetic powers, making him one of the most powerful mutants in existence. So what exactly can Nate Gray do aside from what we've already mentioned? Well, he can manipulate energy and matter, he is capable of psychometry, precognition, teleportation, astral projection, cross-dimensional travel, and energy projection. Sinister had originally designed him so that his powers would inevitably kill him, but after traveling through multiple dimensions, he acquired a special genetic dampener that would prevent that from occurring, and even allowed his abilities to excel further, letting him view and traverse higher planes of existence. He was once measured as having a psionic energy output that matched that of the Dark Phoenix. But after opening a portal to Sugarman's home reality, he gained acute nerve damage, which almost burnt out his entire power set. Moving on to 2, Jean Grey. Jean Grey's presence on this list should be a given. As one of the initial X-Men members, she's been kicking around in the comics since 1963's The X-Men issue 1, born with telekinetic and telepathic powers. Unable to cope with the full scope of her abilities, Charles Xavier would suppress her access to them, focusing on her psychokinetic abilities while training her instead. But the real reason she's on this list is thanks to the Phoenix Force, which amplifies her powers in an astounding way. Initially, the introduction of the Phoenix was a manifestation of her true potential. But as time went on and multiple retcons occurred pertaining to the Phoenix Saga, Jean and the Phoenix Force became separate entities from one another, with Jean acting as a host, but a unique one at that. She's the only character to ever force the Phoenix against its own cosmic will to do her bidding. According to Women of Marvel Celebrating 7 Decades Handbook, I quote, "While empowered by the Phoenix Force, Jean has total telekinetic control of matter at the molecular level, allowing her to manipulate atomic structures on a universal scale. She can generate any form of energy in seemingly unlimited amounts, as well as absorb energy from sources as great as a supernova, or even convert her physical form to pure energy and back again. The Phoenix Force can also resurrect the dead under some conditions, and absorb the life force from other sentient beings to bolster its own." And last but not least, in at number 1, Franklin Richards. Franklin Richards is perhaps one of the most impressive characters on our list, primarily due to his young age. He is the son of Reed Richards and Sue Storm from the Fantastic Four, whose powers over the years have been established as one of the strongest skill sets to appear in Marvel Comics. Franklin can warp reality to the extent that any thought or desire he has, he can bring it to fruition, even on a cosmic scale. He can rearrange the molecular structure of matter and energy at will, and can even create a pocket universe, which he did one time, subconsciously, which was a replica of Earth 616. Here's where it gets fun though. Several cosmic entities, the likes of Eternity, Infinity, and Galactus, have noted that he is on par with Celestials in terms of his power levels. While it's unknown how far his powers may take him in adulthood, we have seen an older version of him from Earth 4280, who destroyed 2 Celestials in combat, and then rubbed shoulders with Galactus, looking out into the galaxy, noting that billions of years from now, the two of them will witness the birth of a new universe. So yeah, that implied he was immortal. It's fun.
Number 10, Brian Morrison. You know, the drummer from that one band? I don't know, he sounds like a drummer. We'll start with a recent addition to Marvel Comics. Brian Morrison made his first debut in X-Men Gold Volume 2, issue 36. He was a pretty average kid until, you know, he wasn't all of a sudden. He entered this frantic state and then he was this living embodiment of power. He looked like he was made of lava almost. It was a scary situation. Buildings, roads, people, animals, all destroyed, just do not get in his way. Now, Cerebro obviously caught this action, and then when the X-Men arrived, Kitty tried to reason with the New Mutant, and it worked for a little bit. He calmed down, he went back to human mode, and then he was asked to come to Xavier Institute for Mutant Education and Outreach, you know, to sharpen up on these new intimidating powers. But an angry townsfolk was still heartbroken over the damage caused beforehand, and then put a bullet in his head. That was a soft sounding gun. A bullet into his head. Now at first the doctors actually didn't want to operate. Because of his powers, they didn't want to administer any anesthesia, and then he'd go all God mode and destroy everyone. Fair. But luckily Dr. Kosaneski agreed to perform surgery on the mutant. They changed their mind about how they felt about mutants. It was a nice moment. So not only did he survive, but he also joined the team right after that. We're off to a good start on this list, I'd say, yeah. Number 9, Exodus. Described as one of the most powerful mutants alive, Exodus is an Omega level telekinetic and he can lift around 100 tons of weight all telekinetically, like I just said. He was born in the 12th century and he made his first appearance in X-Factor 92, and from birth, Bennett felt different. Like he had this power deep within him, something was there, but he wasn't quite sure what it was. Now at this time, he was an adult, he was a crusader who was best friends with the Black Knight of that era, Eobard Garrington. But then when he finally arrived to the Tower of Power all alone, he was exhausted. He had traveled far and wide to get there, and then when he arrived, he heard a voice, and it spoke to him, asking if he was willing to risk everything to become powerful. And he's like, yes. Whoever that is, yes, definitely, yes. Then his powers manifested. So now in X-Men Legacy, he brought Professor X back from the dead, and then in New X-Men Volume 2, Issue 46, he regenerated damaged organs, which honestly, not bad for a guy who's now immortal as well. And before we continue on with this list, we want to ask you guys to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up if you're enjoying it. I mean, if you're still with us now, odds are you're liking it enough, so just give it a little tap, and then we'll get right back into this list. Easy peasy. Number 8, Stryfe. Making his debut in New Mutants issue 87, Stryfe was the clone of Nathan Summers, the son of Cyclops and Madeline Pryor. So he's a clone of Cable from the future, and he has this bad armor. He's a telepathic and telekinetic mutant, and unlike Cable, who has to devote his psionic powers to ensure this techno-organic virus doesn't get his right side as well, Stryfe doesn't need to worry about all that jazz. And obviously Apocalypse wanted this child, he wanted to raise the clone himself so that down the road, he could one day claim the body as his own. Not a bad idea. Apocalypse named him Stryfe, and of course he had evil running through every lesson that he taught him.
Up next, number 7, Mr. M. Mr. M, aka Absalon Mercator, is an Omega level mutant capable of matter manipulation, whose alliance, according to Xavier's files in House of X issue 1, is unknown. Mr. M first appeared in District X issue 2 from 2004 and is capable of psionic manipulation of energy and matter on a subatomic level, as well as telekinesis, telepathy, and energy projection. Now initially he was a bit of a loner, but after M-Day being one of the few unaffected, he stepped up, showing off his near limitless psionic matter manipulation chops, which allows him to generate the likes of fire, heat, and even nuclear energy. He can create and evolve lesser life forms too. Neat. He seemingly died but later disappeared from his coffin, and I guess now is confirmed to be alive based on Xavier's files. Now if Mr. M were to turn against the heroes of the Marvel Universe, he would be a threat that the multiverse may not be able to handle. Here's hoping that that unknown allegiance just ends up meaning, you know, he's impartial as opposed to evil.
Number 6, Professor X. Professor X is a very interesting character to talk about because in the chasm between him and Magneto, writers tend to move him the most. There's something intriguing about warping someone good, that combined with some people's inherent thoughts about Charles's methods. House of X Charles, so modern Charles, who's back from the dead and living life in Phantom X's body, that's why he's walking again, is a force to be reckoned with. He's wearing Cerebro all the time and ready to subjugate all humanity. Too many lost chess games against Eric. Professor X has been around since the very beginning, since the X-Men #1 back in 1963. He is classed as one of the most powerful telepaths in the world, and when unleashed, his powers are terrifying, controlling one without you ever knowing, freezing you in place. But what makes Charles so dangerous is the same thing that makes the likes of Magneto so dangerous. It's the courage of his convictions. Charles believes in what he's doing, so if he comes to believe that he just needs to unleash to get it done, which he has a few times, it's all over.
And at 5, Exodus. Exodus first appeared in X-Factor issue 92 in 1993, and his thirst for power ultimately screwed him over. His Omega level ability is his telekinesis, although he's also capable of telepathy, teleportation, has superhuman physical attributes, and an accelerated regenerative healing factor. Oh, and dude is immortal. Yay, fun. Born in the 12th century, Exodus, aka Benito Peri, sought out to find the Tower of Power, the domain of the Eternal Pharaoh. Traveling through violent sandstorms, he eventually collapsed, hearing a voice that asked him if he was willing to risk everything to become one of the strong. Generally, you probably shouldn't listen to voices that don't have bodies. He was tested and his mutant powers manifested. He was then transformed into Exodus under Apocalypse's command and was later stripped of his power and sealed away in a crypt in the Swiss Alps after he refused to do his bidding and kill his friends. Flash forward to the 20th century, Magneto found Exodus and took him back to Avalon, becoming his right-hand dude and embracing his inner evil. Exodus has the ability to do some pretty terrifying stuff. One time, he simultaneously did all of this: amplified Genosha mutants' hatred of humans, crushed Genosha with a massive force field, immobilized Jean Grey, Scarlet Witch, and others in another force field, resisted Xavier's telepathic control, dealt out powerful psionic damage to the members of the Avengers and the X-Men, all while protecting himself from physical attacks. I don't know about you guys, but that is terrifying.
All I'm thinking is that Tower of Power sounds like an 80s album. Number 4. Proteus. So we've talked about Proteus a few times on this channel, and while his abilities are devastating, here on Nerd it's like we're Dr. Manhattan existing in all time periods simultaneously, so lots of facts from different periods. So Proteus debuted in Uncanny X-Men number 125 back in 1979, the son of Moira McTaggart, locked up from a young age because of the scale of his abilities. Proteus is a being of pure energy, who oftentimes has lived life as a parasite, hopping from host to host, burning up their bodies even though he doesn't have to. He mostly chills in the astral plane now. What many people remember about him is the iconic incident where he melts and warps both Wolverine and Nightcrawler using his powers, and traumatizes them both. Nightcrawler has an entire crisis of faith, and Wolverine is so shook that Cyclops has to throw coffee on him and yell at him to get him to fight again. Which is, yes, a jerk move, but also a distraction technique. There are different kinds of leadership. So Proteus, all reality warpers really are terrifying, and both potentialities of what they can do are equally so. One where you know something has shifted but can do nothing and just run through the streets screaming until it's either be locked up or adapt. Or the one where you never know. There's just a vague terror. The unknown is that your life is constantly shifting around you. Your likes and dislikes, your friends, your enemies, and you'll never know. A puppet in your own life. A being with no agency being toyed with at the hands of a god. Yeah, not here for Proteus, and neither are the X-Men. Half the time, they're so annoyed to see him.
Next, number 3, Vulcan. Vulcan is the brother of Cyclops and Havoc, the child of Christopher Summers, aka Corsair, and Catherine Summers, who was abducted from his mother's womb by the Shi'ar Empire after she was stabbed to death. Yay. As a fetus, he was tossed into a Shi'ar incubation accelerator, a tool normally used to breed slaves. See, all this is really terrible. And was aged to the prime of adolescence. Taking on the name Gabriel, Vulcan is a mutant whose omega power is energy manipulation. He's capable of psionically manipulating, controlling, and absorbing vast amounts of energy, including magical energy and Cyclops' optic blasts to boot. He can go without food for long periods of time by absorbing energy, he can disable large amounts and different types of energy sources, survive in the vacuum of space, which is also terrifying, and can generate powerful enough force fields to allow for interstellar travel. He's also been known to manipulate electricity within a person's brain and use the powers of others by manipulating their own energy sources. Now, the exact limits of this power replication ability is unknown, although he did once use Jean Grey's telepathy without her consent, which is kind of creepy. Now, generally, the character has been known to be a villain. I feel like our whole number kind of defends that fact, but he is loyal to Krakoa, according to Xavier's infograph in House of X issue 1. So here's hoping maybe he won't need to be stopped.
Number 2. Franklin Richards. Franklin Richards has undergone several shifts in power, but he's an Omega level mutant now beyond Omega thanks to House of X. Also, Cyclops is just gunning to separate parents from children in that story so far. Franklin's age also fluctuates. It's hard with kids in comic continuity, and sometimes they'll just suddenly be teens like a soap opera. Also, Franklin has given himself a superhero name, and it's Powerhouse. Yeah, that's what I'd expect a kid to come up with. I bet Reed Richards just goes home and sighs and is like, I'm one of the smartest men in the world. My son calls himself Powerhouse. So Franklin has been described as being one of the Celestials. It's just ridiculous. Thankfully, he is baseline good, because if he wasn't, who could do anything about it? It's pretty heavily implied that he's immortal. When it comes to Franklin, not only does he need to be stopped, but so do the writers. Stop it, it's too much power. There's nothing any of us can do except bow to our new god, especially if Cyclops gets his hands on him.
And last but not least, in our number 1 spot, Magneto. Magneto is not only an Omega level mutant, but one of the most impressive villains to ever grace the pages of comic books, period. He first appeared in the X-Men issue 1 back in 1963, and his Omega power is, of course, magnetism. He manipulates magnetic fields to pull off a variety of stunts, and the max amount he can manipulate at any given time is still unknown. But dude has proved he's capable of some pretty intense feats, including moving whole asteroids and easily levitating a nuclear submarine that weighed 30,000 tons. He can even use his abilities on an atomic level, manipulating chemical structures and rearranging matter, which, yes, is tedious, but Eric is always up to the task when necessary. He can manipulate electromagnetic energy down to photons, and create force fields which selectively block out matter and energy, which he's used to withstand the simultaneous detonation of multiple thermonuclear weapons. That's not even getting to his genius level intellect, or his ability to resist telepathic attacks. He can also read the micro expressions on people's faces to sense what they are feeling and thinking, which Magneto has termed as taking your enemy's measure. Not an Omega level talent, just a neat little trick of his. Needless to say, all of that combined goes to show that there is a reason why he's one of the most persistent villains in Marvel's panels.
Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Hope Summers. Making her first debut in X-Men Volume 2, Issue 205, Hope Summers is the first mutant born post-M-Day. She was born in Alaska and Cerebro just went off the charts. It went nuts. So the Purifiers immediately attacked. They were tipped off by a time-traveling Sentinel, Nimrod. So Cable came in at the same time and eventually saved her, but as for everybody else in that town, well, they didn't get so lucky. Cable saw the child as a messiah, the savior for mutants and humankind, but Bishop and the Purifiers were on a different page. They believed she would become a full-on supervillain. They thought the death toll would be 1 million after just 6 minutes. That's like, you can make rice in 6 minutes and then 1 million people are dead. That's bad news. That's bad news. And then after that, it would obviously only get worse, according to Bishop and his future knowledge. So the future clock was ticking. Hope learned how to fight by studying Cable, and the Strain 88 virus that recharged Rogue's power would kill anybody with just one touch. It was so much that Rogue fell into a coma. But when Hope was taken from Mystique, she was pressed against Rogue's face, and not only did she survive, but she also healed Rogue at the same time. Just like Jean Grey, Hope too was attracting the Phoenix Force, so when the Avengers came along offering to protect the child later on, that just led into Avengers vs. X-Men. So yeah, she's a little important, we can say that. Number 9, Brother Nathan. Brother, here we go. Making his first debut in Cable and Deadpool issue 16, Nathan Summers from Earth 58161 found peace. We'd love to see it. Now at this point, humans were done relying on television and all that crap. Instead, they used their imagination to explore and expand the humankind. How lovely is that? Wonderful. What a future. So our 616 Deadpool came along looking for the missing Cable, and that's where he ended up. He ended up here. Cable, or in this time, Brother Nathan that is, found Wade telekinetically and gave him the rundown. This pitch, this new peaceful environment that he created wasn't actually boring like Wade believed. And only 3 minutes later, Wade was gone. He got out of there. He couldn't do it. Only Cannonball and Siren from this Earth followed him back through dimensions, so he ended up getting in trouble by this quick visit. Brother Nathan is cool though. He's a cool dude. There's a ban on weapons in this timeline, but Nathan had this cool looking spear with a ceremonial blue tassel under the blade. It wasn't for combat, but more for keepsake purposes. And look at him. He looks like a nice dude. He kind of looks like the Lord, dare I say. Also, this world is beautiful. It feels like No Man's Sky meets Wakanda. That's a nice place to be. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up, that would be so great. It's so helpful here at the channel. You guys are the best. Now let's get right back into this awesome part 3. Let's do it. Number 8, White Sword. Among the many mutants residing on Okara, one was known simply as White Sword, or White Sword of the Ivory Spire, which rolls off the tongue a little nicer. He made his first appearance in X-Men Volume 5, Issue 12 during the Ten of Swords storyline. The White Sword and his army of 100 champions were sent to Ament. They battled and bought the mutants some time. So when the dust was settled, White Sword vanished. He never returned with his people again, and after the mutants were trapped in Ament, they saw all these demons who had been crucified, so they knew that the White Sword was there, just kicking all along. Now he was an ally to the mutants of Okara, but after that many years of endless war and resurrection, he eventually started to lose his mind, as one would. He would start attacking his friends as well as enemies. He just couldn't see the difference. I mean, as if living 1,000 years wasn't bad enough, imagine having to spend it constantly fighting for your life. But he is quite good at fighting. He's a master at sword combat, and if he does decide to heal you after a battle, you'll then be enlisted to his army by default. Nice. Number 7, Matthew Malloy. While some mutants seek out the #Omega lifestyle, others just want an ordinary lifestyle. Not everybody wants superpowers, especially Matthew Malloy, that's for sure. I mean, his name alone, he doesn't have like a cool evil alias, he's just Matthew. Hey, it's Matthew. Old Eminem, Matthew Malloy. He appears for the first time in Uncanny X-Men Volume 3, Issue 23, and he doesn't last long. Spoilers, sad spoilers. But it's a good reason, kind of, not really. One day in Charleston, South Carolina, Matt and his wife Jules were having an argument. It was a little bit heated, and then all of a sudden she vaporized. Yeah, the Skrulls have great timing, I guess. And that of course traumatized him, and then a year later when he finally saw Jules' sister, his late wife's sister Alana, well, more bad stuff happened. He got so upset when he saw her and he started to remember all these things that his powers manifested, and he released this explosion of energy. Heartbroken energy. Alana's life was taken this time as well, so it's just getting worse and worse. His powers were uncontrollable. Multiple X-Men were biting the bullet after trying to stop this guy. So Tempest thought, you know what, let's just go back in time, and with the help of Professor X, also from the past, we can make sure Matthew's parents never meet and then never and have him. Fair, good point. And the way Charles does it too is so casual. He's like, all right, ready? We're good. Let's go home. Number 6, Mastermind. Jason Wingard made his first appearance in X-Men issue 4. Now, he started off as a carnival mentalist, but was soon recruited into the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants from Magneto himself. He was needed for a very specific job. See, Jason, well rather Mastermind, was hired to use his illusionary powers to change Lorna Dane's memories so that she doesn't know that she's Magneto's daughter. Instead, she was made to believe that her parents had actually passed in a plane crash when she was just a wee child. Mastermind's power was also a necessity when it comes to taking over the country of Santo Marco. Mastermind was tasked to create an illusory army, and then he smiled as Magneto took over. He was like his little sidekick, little magician sidekick. He was like David Blaine, but like, you know, evil and a sidekick. Once Mastermind cast an illusion of Cyclops to surprise Magneto, great prank, awesome, but Magneto ended up using a magnetic blast back, and then Scarlet Witch was the only real one in the way. It's just a prank, dude, it's just a prank, relax. Number 5, Lauka the Knower. Making their first appearance in Planet-Size X-Men yesterday, how lovely, Lauka was a member of the Great Ring of Araco. Now their power could come in handy around the house. They simply know the location of everything, and yes, including that one shirt that you still can't find. Where is it? Maybe the cottage? Maybe it's at the cottage. They helped out Marvel Girl and Exodus actually when they had to move the entire island of Araco to Mars. Yeah, that's quite the move. All hands on deck. They're an Omega level mutant with extreme spatial awareness, but it's still unknown if that means the universe that they're in, or if that also includes the multiverse. We're still trying to figure that out in comics. Either way, there's room on this list for that new mutant. Number 4, Maddie, aka The Weapon. Good nickname. Maddie made her first debut in Deadpool vs. Old Man Logan issue 1. She was a mutant who started to steal others' belongings in school. Now, she didn't mean to by any means, but they would just kind of teleport to her all of a sudden. Then one day when she was missing her father, he was working far away, she hadn't seen him in about a year, she accidentally teleported him to her. What a pleasant surprise. He was like mid-shovel too. Only thing was, this does a lot of damage to a human being, so they don't often survive this cosmic commute. So now she was detected by Cerebro, so Logan investigated what was going on. And that's when she ran into Wade, who also joined in on the fun. Now, in actuality, Maddie wanted to be captured by Genform so that she herself could understand her powers more. But then when Genform abducted her and did experiments, she was then forced to teleport these massive vehicles and structures over Deadpool in order to crush him. Now, the way Maddie helped him out was pretty cool, I gotta admit. She teleported Wolverine's claws into Wade's fists, and then he dug his way out. And yes, in case you were wondering, the claws were returned afterwards. Maddie took care of Genform's leader, Agent Hart, 2 months later herself. We love revenge. Nice. Number 3, Decimus Furious. Decimus Furious sounds like a Harry Potter spell. Decimus Furious made his first debut in Uncanny X-Force issue 1. He was born in Rome. Both of his parents sadly passed away when he was really young, so he had no choice but to live in the streets. So then around 281 AD, yeah, this was a little while ago, that's when his powers emerged. He started to attack people randomly until he was eventually locked up. He didn't really know what was going on. But it also didn't take long for his skills to be used in the Colosseum as a gladiator. He fought every day for his life for a few years, with freedom being that glorious prize that he's always chasing after. He was soon worshipped as the dark god Minotaur, so yeah, he was kind of killing it. He was picked as Apocalypse's final horseman, the horseman of war, of course, and he fought Deadpool, and then soon he fought the entire X-Force. This guy was a unit. He had war-filled psyche, so if you try and read his mind, it will backfire, and then you'll be overthrown with sorrow and hate. Plus, you don't want to get too close to this guy anyways, because one hit from his axe, and you'll soon have the cold thirst for war, just attacking people around you for no reason. Number 2, Isca. Isca the Unbeaten, there's a name for you. She made her first debut in X-Men Volume 5 issue 12 just last year, so also quite new. Isca was one of the many who lived on Okara. Now when her sister, Genesis, had 4 children, Isca forged the Scarab to celebrate, which was his epic sword divided into 4 parts. She gave it to her brother, Apocalypse, brother by marriage. Very important to say, brother by marriage, not blood brother. Now the Scarab was a symbol of the Genesis line of Okara, and when the mutants went to battle with the Amenthi Daemons, Isca betrayed her kind and then joined Annihilation's army. Traitor. I mean, well, her power is literally to not lose, so it made sense. Yeah, so she obtains what's called psychokinesis, so never play poker with her, because you'll lose. Because she can't lose. She literally can't lose. One-on-one, battles, dance-offs, you name it, she'll win them all. Probability is manipulated in her favor, and on top of that, she can also shapeshift if need be. Like when she joined Annihilation, her body was then covered in all these occult symbols. And then when she's aligned with the X-Men, her skin turns from red to gold. How neat. Number 1. Gabriel Shephard. Making his debut in X-Men Volume 3, Issue 36, Gabriel Shephard was the last of the Proto-Mutants. That's when the X gene was first evolved. So that was like 700 years ago, and luckily he was the most powerful and average looking, so he took on new identities, always moved about, he played it safe. He was blending in as a human, until the X-Men tracked him down to ask him about all these proto-mutants. But Gabriel's powers were already in play here. See, he read their minds, and then learned that the other proto-mutants had been resurrected to be used just as a weapon. But they didn't say any of that in the pitch, so he got upset and attacked. Then Pixie sent him to a timeout in Antarctica, and then after he cooled down, pun intended, he had a conversation with Pixie about the past and then decided to never let proto-mutants be used again, including himself. And then he turned himself into pure energy. What a way to go. Number 10, Iceman. Bobby Drake made his first X-Men debut in X-Men issue 1. Now his powers are pretty obvious. I mean, even his name alone should tip you off. He can lower his external and internal body temperature because there are nerves that regulate body temperature, and they're found in a part of the brain called the hypothalamus. See, Bobby can override this nerve drastically. His mutation allows him to withstand sub-zero temperatures and turn into ice within seconds. He can fully control ice, snow, probably snow cones, realistically. He can freeze the moisture in the air, just like Frozone, and create anything that he imagines. He can also create cold clones of himself on a molecular level, so you won't even see him coming, but you'll definitely feel it. Number 9, Elixir. Josh Foley made his comic book debut in New Mutants Volume 2, Issue 5. Now he was detected by Cerebro, and his Omega power is actually quite helpful in this case. See, he obtains an Omega class healing ability, and around M-Day he was actually considered a general threat, weirdly enough. See, Elixir is able to control the biological structure of his and others' bodies. I mean, down to the genetic level. He can produce biomolecular energy whenever he chooses, affecting any matter that he chooses to come into contact with. So if he uses his powers too much, he'll pass out and just remain in a coma. It takes a toll on him. His DNA reboots itself, which is pretty impressive. I mean, I get a bruise and it hangs out for like an entire week. What's going on there? He was able to regrow Prodigy's heart in New X-Men Volume 2, Issue 39, and he cured X-23 of the legacy virus, and Josh himself says that he can cure Sabretooth from the inversion effect. What a combo. This guy can also bring people back from the dead. You can't really beat that. Number 8, Legion. David Haller made his comic debut in New Mutants issue 26. He was a child of Xavier and Gabriel Haller, who later became the Israel ambassador to the United Kingdom. So the parents, I mean, there's a lot of pressure there already. See, he was kind of an accident. It happens. The pair had an affair decades back, but Charles was unaware that she was pregnant when he left her. Now the child was of course born a mutant with telepathic and telekinetic abilities, but he also had the ability to cause destruction with just his mind. The old Charles gene coming into play. Scott Summers describes David as Omega level, and the reason he's named Legion, well, it comes from the biblical demon Legion, where a man was possessed by many evil spirits, because David has 3 different personalities. All the powers with all the personalities. That's a scary, you don't want that. You don't want to run into him. Number 7, Zorn. Jean Grey, this time from Earth 13729. This gene first appeared in X-Men Battle of the Atom issue 1. Zorn, well rather Professor Zorn that is, was a teacher at the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning, and this is the past Jean grown up, right? That's important to say. Battle of the Atom was a crossover event where the future X-Men travel back to the original 5, but they weren't exactly X-Men though. They were future Brotherhood of Mutant members, led by Charles Xavier II and Reyes, those 2 villain kids. So Jean Grey went by Zorn and rocked the skull helmet. It was a vibe, it was a pretty good look. The team wanted to force the OG back to the past and prevent their future. Now this version of Jean didn't have the Phoenix Force attached to her, but she was still able to take on Emma Frost. She was quite powerful. The dialogue alone is pretty great here. Jean is asking Jean what happens in the future that makes her such a What a way to put it, right to the punch. Now this version of Jean can't go more than a few minutes without Zorn's containment helmet, and she has similar powers as our other Jean that we know, only they grow in strength this time around. It's trouble. Number 6, James Braddock Jr. First appearing in Captain Britain issue 9, Jamie Braddock Jr., the oldest son, of course, from Dr. James and Lady Elizabeth Braddock. And when I say oldest, he's 10 years older than his siblings, the twins Betsy and Brian Braddock. Now Jamie can manipulate reality, but it never started that way. He was brilliant when it came to finances, and if that's too by the books for you and not cool enough, he was also a pro race car driver. Nice. He found out about his brother's secret identity, and then he helped out here and there as a supporting character to his comic run. But Jamie started to get behind on bills, so he resorted to crime. First starting with minor crimes, and then as these debts grew, he had to get really dark and grimy with his actions. Eventually, Dr. Crocodile kidnapped him, told Brian about his brother's crime work, and his brother kind of just let him go, right? Doc Croc was evil. After these experiments, Jamie was convinced that this reality that he lives in is actually just a dream, and his mind was just breaking. It was sad stuff. This just happened to be the tipping point for Jamie to meet his mutant power, which also happened to be the ability to warp and restructure reality in his immediate vicinity. Terrible, powerful combo right there. Troublesome. He views the world as invisible strings that he plucks away at. It's like Interstellar style. Murph. Number 5. Archangel. Warren's wings are pretty amazing as is, but during the X-Force storyline, he got the upgrade of a lifetime. He got techno-organic wings by Apocalypse after he became the Horseman of Death. The old HOD. Sometimes they work. I thought he was powerful before, but this is just another level. His feathers were much stronger this time around as the Horseman, and he could fire them off like bullets. They could pierce right through steel, or he could use the wings to smash and fly through anything. Either or. The techno-organic wings regrew afterwards for a second time, along with the new blue skin tone to match Apocalypse. Now this form of Angel is hard to keep away. He often struggles to keep his heroic side in control. If Apocalypse made me a Horseman of Death and I got all that extra power, I'd be pretty annoyed having it taken away every now and then. I get it. Number 4. Nathaniel Gray. This mutant is from an alternate reality, like some of our other ones that we talk about. He styles himself as a mutant shaman, loaded with precognition, telepathy, telekinesis. Who is he? Let's talk about him. Coming from Earth 295, artificially created from Sinister and the High Lord Apocalypse, Nate Gray is made of genetic materials from Cyclops and Jean Grey. He was created to be the ultimate telepath, and I think it kind of worked. He was made as a power bid to go against Apocalypse as well, and he's classified as an Omega level mutant, the most powerful psionic in any reality. Not just that one, and he's near omnipotent. So he's basically a living god. Neat. Just a fraction of power was enough to overload Omega and Mimic in Dark X-Men issue 2. Sentry and Nate Gray both fought Galactus in Dark X-Men issue 3, so it's fair to throw him on this list, I'd say. Number 3. Seline. AKA Black Priestess, Seline made her first debut in New Mutants issue 9. She was born 17,000 years ago, give or take, right after the Oceans, ate Atlantis. She was an enemy of the Sorcerer Kulan Gath in Uncanny X-Men 191, and her powers are pretty spectacular, and also terrifying. She can drain the life force out of you in order to live longer. All she has to do is come into physical contact, and you're toast, mister. No fist bumping Seline in this house. Her tribe realized she was powerful right from the get-go, way back when humankind was just starting to evolve, really. So her tribe's elders all sacrificed their lives to make her more powerful and everlasting. That's a solid tribe, ride or die right there. They obviously chose die, but still, they're riding a little bit. The character Seline from the Underworld series, funny enough, was actually based off of this Seline from the comics, and I can totally see Kate Beckinsale now every time I see her, and so will you. Number 2. Apocalypse. Making his first steps in Marvel graphic novel issue 17, he was born nearly 5,000 years ago at the edge of the Valley of the Kings in ancient Egypt. He was born with gray skin and had blue lines all over his face. He looked different, so he was abandoned by his tribe. He was raised with the nomads with the idea that only the strong survive. So Apocalypse was killed by agents of Ozymandias, but was later revived thanks to his mutant abilities. Where to even begin with his Omega level mutant's abilities? I mean, self-molecular manipulation allows for him to alter his physical form for starters. He's also a genius. Even before being modified by the celestial ship, Apocalypse was already living for thousands of years. All he has to do is drift into a gentle coma. Number 1 trick to getting your beauty sleep. A coma, that ought to do it. X-Men Age of Apocalypse from 1995, we see just how big and bad this guy can get. Oscar Isaac also had a swing at him in X-Men Apocalypse on the big screen, and I thought he was pretty scary, but when he gets big, it's just nightmare fuel. Check it out. And finally, number 1, Onslaught. Making his first debut in X-Men issue 15, Onslaught was a sentient psionic entity created by the minds of Charles Xavier and Magneto. What a combo! So when the X-Men were fighting the Acolytes, Wolverine hit Magneto, and then in turn, Magneto ripped the adamantium from Wolverine's bones, which I gotta say, I thought hangnails were bad. This sounds way worse. His healing factor had to work overtime, and Xavier was beyond upset, so he shut down Magneto's mind. He just made him completely catatonic. But during this moment, all of Magneto's lust for hate and violence leaked into Charles' consciousness, creating this new personality, Onslaught. Onslaught is pretty OP. He has the ability to tap into the psychic resources of the astral plane, where he can then manipulate matter and energy. Telepathy, telekinesis, electromagnetic manipulation, just a combo you don't want to face in any way.